Hey, thanks for joining us today for another episode of the TL Accelerator podcast. This is where team leaders can get together, learn best practices, model systems that other team leaders and top performers are doing across the country so we can help each other get better to build a better Keller Williams at large. So thank you guys for joining us today. And golly, I have an exciting guest today. Mike Ray is going to be sharing with us. He's out of Atlanta, Georgia, the Sandy Springs office. Right now, as we look in and heading into May, Mike is number one on the reports for owner profit share in the whole company. And so Mike is, they're running about 520 agents. So it is just an extraordinary story to hear some of his background that he's brought to the table. I think you guys will be super intrigued to know that Mike, before this job, actually was involved in church planting back in the day and just has this really great understanding of how to build community and how to do it purposefully, how to celebrate in a manner, and how to build culture because of some of his past experiences. So you're going to hear some really nuanced details about his focus, the way he approaches culture, the way he approaches community, and just the execution of what he's pulling off. I think you'll be really impressed, inspired by what Mike's done. And I think there's a lot to learn from this man. So hopefully we'll have him back on additional things. So please listen in, and you're going to hear one of my favorite elements that I heard. It's be happy or be gone. So that'll be the title of this podcast, Be Happy or Be Gone with Mike Ray. And just so thankful to hear from him. Please tune in. And remember, we're going to have a diving deep segment that'll be available after you listen to this. And feel free to subscribe. We'd love to have you as a follower on Apple iTunes, tlaccelerator.com if you want to check out the blogs there. And then also you can download a new tool that we're working on called the TL Accelerator scorecard. So to help you kind of score out the areas of success as a team leader, to help you build a better gap and clarity around what you're trying to develop in yourself and help to create a great market center. So thank you guys for tuning in today, and we will certainly get a lot of value out of this podcast. So listen in as Mike shares all the goods of who he is and what he's accomplished in his role. All right. Welcome. We got Mike Ray today on the Team Leader Accelerator podcast, Atlanta, Georgia, Sandy Springs. Is that correct? Do I got it right?
You got it. That's it.
All right, my man. Welcome to the podcast, the video podcast, whatever we're doing here and today. And this is kind of a special moment because not only do we have a wonderful team leader on, but right now he happens to be, and where are we at? We're March, April, going into May, number one in owner profit and profit share, correct? Is that where we're at?
Absolutely. We sure are. Yeah.
Holy cow. I tell you what. So we're talking to the right guy today if we're going to learn something about building a profitable market center, because he's certainly involved in that process. So, hey, let's just do a little round of applause. Congratulations for that, my man.
Thank you. As I told you before we got started now, we've always been hovering in that top 5 spots. So I guess it took a pandemic to push us to the top, which is, if I had to find a silver lining in the pandemic, I'll take it. We've been very blessed and fortunate to maintain some real estate business in the Atlanta market. My agents have been able to stay focused on their business in spite of the pandemic, and that's really helped us. So I'm very thankful for their hard work to get us there.
Awesome. And that's a great point. And you're going to hear early and often the context. You know, I had a chance to talk to Mike a little bit before we got going, and I was really intrigued already just to the way he approaches answers, the way that he always circles back to his people. And that's going to be, I think, something we're going to learn as a team leader community. He won't let a second go by before he puts the right, kind of the right, amount of success for what he's got from his people. So it's he's landing it in the right place. So that's very cool, Mike. So let's do this. We want the world to know a little bit about you. I like to hear some of the stories of maybe your past experiences in business or in a career that led you up to being a team leader. And because I think some of that oftentimes as a very successful team leader, we miss the fact that maybe there was a corporate America experience or a big experience building a big team. And as team leaders, we may have some missing skill sets that we need to grow or develop so we can achieve at a high level. So give us a little bit of background about yourself, the Reader's Digest version, so to speak, of your career and until you ended up as a team leader in this role.
So Chad, you and I share another love, and that's for my Florida Gators. So I'm actually Floridian.
Yeah.
as well. I grew up for a little bit in Jacksonville, and then grew up most of my life in Gainesville, and had the privilege of going and doing my undergraduate degree at Florida, degree in college journalism, public relations.
Hmm.
Worked in public relations for a while, and then went to grad school. And some of you guys have probably been in Gary's top 200, or you may have heard Gary say over the last year that one of the things that he really thinks is a great um, analogy, a great thing for us to look at for running our market centers is like a mega church. You heard this? Have y'all heard him say this
I have
before?
heard that. Yeah.
So I built mega churches.
Did you
That
really?
that was truly my past career. I went to
Oh my
seminary. I
gosh.
can marry, bury, and baptize you if you need me to. I was never a traditional minister. I was the executive administrative pastor for churches. I would help them build megachurch campuses. And so we would buy land, build buildings, figure out the infrastructure, put it all together and make it work. So when he ever brings up that analogy, I'm like, I know exactly what he's talking about because I did that. I did it in North Carolina, Virginia, Mississippi, Texas, and then that's what brought me to Atlanta. We helped a campus on the south side of Atlanta build out 88 acres of land and their ministries there. So that was, I was facing another move, and we had a surprise baby that we weren't expecting. And so I made a decision to do a career change, and that's how I found real estate back in 2012. I've only been with KW. I'm as Kellerized as you can possibly be, I think. I started in 2012. I was Rookie of the Year for the Southeast in 2013, and I had a business partner, and she and I built an MREA team together by 2014. We grossed $1 million, netted $1 million that year. We sold 222 units in 2014. That's when my team leader, who was getting ready to transition to an OP role, said, "Have you ever thought about leadership?" And I said, "No," because I ran churches and I didn't want to do that again. I'd had enough of dealing with volunteer labor and to think about leading independent contractors. No, 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 no. I gave in, and this past this past week, May 1st, was my 5th anniversary as being a team leader. Started in the Peachtree City, Georgia Market Center. Loved those people. That was where I was an agent. We started with me being a team leader at 116 agents, and we grew to just over 300 agents in 2 years, and then got the opportunity to move to the First Atlanta Sandy Springs Market Center in the heart of Metro Atlanta, where I've been since November 2017. So just about 3 years I've been in the leadership role there. And we have grown to just over 520 agents. So 520 strong. My ALC, I've got 22 of them actively engaged in culture, doing what they're supposed to do every day. They're phenomenal men and women. I could not be more thankful. Very multicultural market center, literally agents from all around the world. I always tell people, pick a religion, we probably have it. Pick a holiday, we're probably celebrating it. It's Atlanta. So, and that's okay. I love that part of our market center.
God, man,
That
that's
good?
so cool. That's so good, man. I'm sitting here. You didn't tell me this part when we talked offline.
I
It,
know it didn't
or
come up.
I might have missed it. But you built mega churches
I did.
as an experience prior to this role. Man, does anybody else know that correlation, like through Keller at all? Like, do they know that? Does Gary know that?
I think so. I think he
Yeah.
does. Obviously, all of my coaches know, and all
Yeah.
of those people. So yeah, absolutely. It's not a secret.
Man.
Sure.
Yeah, that's super cool. But I mean, God, what a mapping in of understanding how to build culture, community. I've oftentimes, before I even heard Gary talk about it, I'm sitting at the church I go to, and I mean, I don't know what constitutes a mega church. It's probably got about 2,000 people that go to the church, and runs 4 or 5, 3 or 4 services, something like that.
Right.
Um, and man, I tell you what, I sit there and I go, I see a system here, I see a model, I see a process, I see the message, I see the discipleship groups, I see the small groups, and I look back at my market center and go, man, and you have the process of tithing to a church and concept, and I go, that kind of matches the they're getting value there, they're and for a bigger perspective, certainly we're doing that for different reasons, but And then, but agents, they're choosing to be somewhere, to listen to a message, to be in small pockets of relationships, and to offer some of their commission to the process. And so, like, man, it is eerily similar to that
Very
process.
simple. He's
Yeah.
super spot on when he said, every time he says it, I think, yeah, yes, that is 100% correct. And it's for just what you described. It's all of the inner workings of that have to stay in sync for it to just literally pull off a service every week. I mean,
Yeah.
that was so I get it. And the relentlessness of what we do as a team leader, it certainly resonates, right? In some ways, when we get to do our weekly team meetings, we're going to give some sort of a sermon, or we planned a service of sorts, right?
Yeah.
So I find lots of commonalities for sure.
I feel like you're going to have to do some sort of module, like all these different, like what you learned about that. Cause there's probably this mapping of this experience that gives you such this, a different capacity. Um, and even in the business world, there's not a system that mirrors, that as closely. So that's really interesting about those experiences. We'll dive into that at a later time, but man, super cool to know that about you. So as you've kind of taken over this role, the market center was pretty well established. It was doing well. You said it was a kind of a flagship of that region. Um, and so as you came aboard and you started to add to, that particular market center, what was Mike Ray and your unique gifts and your abilities and what you've done to maintain the growth. What do you think you brought to the table to add to that market center that's made an impact?
So that's a great question. A couple of things that immediately came to my mind, Chad, were um, I joined kind of in the heat of the growth initiative movement
Mhm.
when in KW. And my predecessor, who's a good man and done a great job in growing the market center, had to make some decisions in his leadership mindset that really helped them accomplish those growth initiative goals. And so because of that, there was some cultural deficiencies within the market center, and they had lost some identity, and they had actually slipped back in where they were in some of their goals. They weren't number one in every category where they had been number one in the region for a long time. And so I quickly heard from the agents as I got to know them in those first months, they wanted to be number one again. And I knew we were never going to get back to number one in closed volume and number one in closed units and number one in profit. We had stayed number one in profit where we'd slipped in closed volume until we got all on the same page again. So it was really about building community again and building our culture back up and making them excited and proud to be a part of KW First Atlanta. So we started a campaign that, all around the word believe. Do we believe we're number one? And if we are number one, how do we behave if we're number one? And what's going to get us to number one? It's definitely productivity. It was definitely recruiting and growth. But it was also having a culture that was attractional. There are other people in it. We want to be a part of that. We don't want to miss that. I mean, it's the same. Again, it goes back to the church thing. Like, how do I build an expectation where people are afraid to miss something? I built the same kind of systems in place within our culture. Like, you do not want to miss team meeting this week. We've got this amazing thing happening, and you don't want to not be a part of this. And so that whole fear of missing out, the FOMO thing that everybody talks about in millennials, we
Yeah.
just started to kind of capitalize on it and re-engage our culture, that we're a family, that we care about each other. That was a big win for us, and I think that was something that I could bring back from a relationship side that was extremely important to the market center, and it really has catapulted us back to where they wanted to be at number one across the board. I think the other thing that we did, and I know we'll dig into this a little bit more, but there were some strategic decisions that needed to be made around staffing. There were some staff members that it was time for them to not be staff members anymore. And
Sure.
those are always fun decisions. But I knew if we made them the right way, we could protect the culture, protect the community, and send them out the door as they needed to go. And we could make the changes that would make us stronger as a market center. And so a lot of that was just making strategic decisions around staffing and productivity coaching systems that were a little bit troublesome when I got there. And so we just started really digging into the inner workings of how do we manage this market center day to day, and who is managing this market center with me
Mm.
to make sure that we're on the same page. And I told my staff early on, we didn't talk about this. I have some weird little idiosyncrasies, but one of them is be happy or be gone. If you can't be happy on my staff, then I'm sure you can be happy somewhere else, but your energy is not going to be my energy. And number two, if an agent is leaving because of you and something you did, guess what? You get to leave with them. It's a great opportunity. They're leaving our market center, and so are you, because we don't have people leave us because of our misbehaviors. Right now, if it's a misunderstanding or something that can be repaired, or the agent was out of line, but if you were just flat out of line, and that's, it happens. I know it's shocking, but we've had people
Yeah.
lose their mind and do things they shouldn't do as staff. You get the opportunity to go with them. So they knew right away that I was serious about it. So
Did you
then
get
it
that from any of your other roles? Is that's just something you came up with?
No, I mean, I kind of always have been that way.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I always manage things with the church. So, I mean, you got hundreds of volunteers. People don't have to be in your church any more than they have to be in our market centers.
Yeah.
So what are we doing to keep them? It's that value piece that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm asking them to pay me a cap. Am I giving them the value for the cap? And if a staff member is dragging that down, you're a value add problem. I
Yeah.
need you to I need to make sure that my staff is giving value add.
I love
And I'm part of that. I can be just as guilty. I think I told you the story last week. I was not in a good mind space over decisions that were being made in the state of Georgia by our governor that were causing some really polarizing social media posts by our agents, and it just put me in a bad space. So I fired myself on a Tuesday and said, I'm now going home. I'm not your team leader the rest of the day because I'm not in a good space to be your team leader. I think it's just that self-awareness around that. And some people, it's just time to be out of their role. So that was part of what I brought, that strategy into the market centers. I really think building back community and culture, and then the strategy. Make people excited and I'm part of First Atlanta.
Yeah. How did you know to isolate that? So when we think about being strategic, part of that is taking priorities, is going, all right, I've got 1,000 things I can do. I got 1,000 elements I could press, but I chose this one first, or whichever one you chose. So what did you kind of, as you came in and did an assessment of everything, you say, all right, here's where this company's at. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this. Did you choose culture first? Is that what was your first agenda, and relationship?
100% relationships. We've all been told by our MAPS coaches and our OPs, when you go into a market center, re-recruit your roster, right? That's something we've all been taught to do. And so I knew I was going to have that opportunity through the interview process, spending time with the ALC and with the staff through that interview process. And Jean Rawls, who is my OP, who I just think the world of. Jean is an amazing woman. And we talk strategically about the culture issue. So she was aware. But it became super painfully apparent when you're in a room and you can see the looks on the faces of each as they look at each other. You can see the disunity in the group. You could feel that energy where people were not being respectful to maybe one another when they were talking to each other. That included staff and ALC. So it was easy to make an assessment just by behaviors and language patterns and body language that I'm watching as people are communicating, going, oh my gosh, these people hate each other.
Yeah.
Or they certainly don't respect one another. And we got to fix that, because I don't think it was unrepairable. For some people it was, and they ended up leaving us.
Yeah.
But for most people, it was just they needed to be shown some respect and have it modeled appropriately. It was a lot about modeling the behavior back to them.
Interesting.
They
Yeah, I was
had
about to
stopped.
say, how do you fix that? So like, I feel, and I'm 7 years in the role. I'm a smaller market center. I feel like there's things I've done well as a team leader growing something, yet there are some areas that still seem a little bit fuzzy. And one of them is getting I feel like you isolated some elements in the cultural dynamic, and you also aggressively went after fixing it with ideas and strategies. And you had a picture of maybe what you think it should look like.
Right.
How do you fix culture? I mean, what does that look like?
So I had had an opportunity early on in my team leader role to attend a John Maxwell big conference he does. The name is escaping me. It's every
Okay.
October. Some of y'all probably have watched. It's a live stream that he does, a leadership conference.
Okay.
And I had heard this speaker. She was a CEO of a company, and I'll tell you the name of it, and you're going to say, "Excuse me," but she was this lady. She was very plain looking. I mean, that sounds awful. But it's true. She just seemed very ordinary. I was like, what in the world could she possibly have to say? And she had been the CEO of Popeye's Fried Chicken. I was like, seriously, what could she possibly say that is anything profound? And when she got up to start speaking, she was very quiet, very soft-spoken. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this could be the longest 45 minutes of this entire day. And it was the most profound of the entire day, because she started speaking about how she had turned around Popeye's Fried Chicken and regained a brand for them and grew them back to where they are now. She's not in the role anymore, but she equated it back to a servant mindset of serving the franchise owners, of serving her customers, which were the owners of those restaurants. And so it really stuck with me, and the fact that everything she does, and I follow her still on Instagram, and everything she posts, she's written books about this whole idea of serving your community. And what I realized was nobody had been modeling that in our market center. And so for me, it was about modeling that. And for modeling it, for me, it was a lot of, if I said I was going to do something, I actually did it. If you gave me a lead and you wanted to follow up, I actually followed up, and they were stunned to hear that I was calling them and say, hey, guess what? I just met your person and they're signing in with us. Or I'm showing up a half hour earlier. Or, oh, we're going to go and deliver this, and I'm showing up to go do it with them. So I modeled it.
Mm.
I projected it in video. I taught about it. I held standards. They saw me call out people and remove people who were not in culture and were not willing to be in culture. And when they knew I did that, they started to behave that way, and we started to see massive change within the market center. And it wasn't slow, Chad. It really happened very quickly, because the good part about KW, when I said I'm super calorized, is that that culture is starting to teach into us early on in every class that we take. So it wasn't a foreign concept to them. They had just gotten lazy about it. They had just stopped doing it, and the leadership had stopped modeling it. And when we stopped modeling it, why should they behave any different? So we just turned that around.
That's
And I held.
interesting. So I'm thinking about new team leaders coming up and those that are working to reinvent themselves and develop. That is an interesting dynamic. That's a lot to take on, to say, you know what? We're all at different places, but I'm going to model the things that need to be fixed first and foremost, right? And so you have to have integrity with yourself to say, I'm going to wake up today, what I'm going to say I'm going to do, and what we're going to, if there's a culture to exist, I have to exude it first. I have to be it first. The be do have kind of concept, be do achieve. Sorry.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
But I have a question real quick. I've been studying up on culture, and I had a buddy tell me that you have to have a culture has a root of justice, like man, how did he say this? At the root of culture is there has to be justice and joy. So how do you feel about that? So you said something, I had standards and I held them. If you got to go, you got to go. And I did it, and it fixed kind of quick. I think a lot of us let things fester because we're nervous about losing people or what's on the other side of it. So we don't create that just environment. Could you speak on that at all?
Yeah, and I think that there's a way that you can do that. You can administer justice. People want that. Like, again, it's something that we're taught early on as Americans, I think, this idea of things being just and right. Those of us that come from a Judeo-Christian background and religions, it's taught to us about justice. And so it's not a foreign concept. I think the problem is that people have seen people be treated unjustly or unfairly. And so when you execute it and you're consistent with it, and you're fair, and you don't make it into a gossip moment, and you hold those standards around the justice, I think people welcome that and they appreciate that, and your leaders will stand with you in that. And I think I love that you brought that in with the joy too, because that's another thing. You've got to balance the whole thing with celebration and joy, because that brings a different energy to the market center as well. And my agents would tell you, Mike Ray will celebrate anything. Give us a reason to celebrate. Let's celebrate that. That sounds like a good thing to celebrate today. You know, if we can, let's find something to be excited about, because it changes our energy. So it really was about balancing, hey, let's make some hard decisions, let's hold some standards, but let's also celebrate some really good things and be excited about that, and not walk away from the hard conversation, but spend more time on the good conversation. Right.
And so, as you confronted some of that and you move forward, did you have experience from either your other roles in the past that you knew that this was were you kind of proven talent in this respect? Did you know the path here, or was there still some angst of, I don't know if I got this one, but I'm going to do it anyway. I know what's right.
Well, I think for us as team leaders in KW, no matter what we bring to the role from our past, right? I think I probably brought some things that I had learned, but because KW is so models and systems driven, which is one of the things that attracted me to the company, you got to think, okay, how do I fit me? How do I fit my personality, my natural tendencies as a leader into those models and systems to make this work? So I think there is a little bit of the unproven. You know, early on, I remember everybody telling me, recruit, recruit, recruit. If you recruit, everything fixes itself. And I was going, oh, okay, well, I'd never recruited anybody. So I was totally unproven in that.
Yeah.
I just knew how to hang out and have a good conversation with somebody. And I'm happy with that all day. I'm happy to sit and talk to you about anything. But to recruit you, I was like, oh, you want me to actually get them to sign up to do something, right? So I would say there was some probably natural things that I had proven myself in, but putting those natural things into that specific KW model and system of how to do leadership was not proven. And so I had to figure out, how do I wed those together in a way that feels like me, that I can feel proud of me at the end of the day? And how can I do it in a way that honors the people that choose to call my market center home? So I think that was a big part of it. And over time, I got more confident with that. I was like, okay, I can do this. And I can still be successful. We can still recruit. We can still grow. We can still be profitable at a high level. And we're going to celebrate all that too, because that's just as important as everything else. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so we had two things you kind of said that were, where you feel pretty significantly skilled at, or that might we say might be your superpowers, is one is that community building,
yeah.
which has that aspect of culture. But you also said that you felt like you're pretty strategic and forward thinking on chess moves and ideas about things that need to be in place. And can you speak on what you mean by that? So if you're a strategic leader, how does that show up?
Well, I think if we're going to just look at the right now, the market of the moment strategy, we made very quick, decisive decisions based on information as it was coming into us about how to manage this pandemic. And the thing that we wanted to do, as we were asking our agents to become virtual, as we were asking our agents to keep working, because if they didn't work, we didn't work, was to figure out, how do we as a staff model that? Because again, I'm about modeling it back to them. And so what's the right decisions from a staff perspective? And so we started adjusting and looking at schedules, and we probably adjusted them 3 different times over about 10 days until we felt like we had figured out a system that worked best for communicating with agents. How many times a day are we going to communicate? How many times a week? What does our class schedule adjust to? When are we meeting as a staff? Who's working from home? Who's in the office? What are our rules of engagement in the office? What are we saying no to in the office? And at the same time, we immediately dug into, because we were all being coached from Gary Keller, from our MAPS coaches, from our regional directors, from our OPs, we got to look at our budgets. So I'm also at the same time strategically managing with my MCA, what are we doing from a budget standpoint, and what do you recommend? And so the strategy has, all of that worked, Chad, because we had been working as a team, and I had been strategically building them into their roles for just time as this, right? that when it was time for us as a team to roll up our sleeves, when it was time for my ALC to jump in and serve with us, everybody knew what we were going to do and they trusted me to do it. But that was a strategic decision I started working on a long time ago. I'd earned that opportunity to, one, trust my MCA to come with me with a set list of recommendations of where we can cut, to hear directly from my assistant team leader on how we were going to schedule out recruits. What are we doing? The Georgia Real Estate Commission just shut down. They completely shut down. And so they stopped giving out real estate licenses. So that just removed part of my recruiting platform. So let's go back to our pipeline strategically, and who's on the pipeline that's already licensed or at another company with some market share list that we're sitting on. How do we strategically go after them? So that's kind of the market of the moment strategy thinking. I think do you want to talk a little bit about the technology piece of this and my roles strategically?
I think, what I really kind of wanted to pull from you in this segment is understanding you as an executive, and you, when you show up on the scene, the skills, the background, the things that you've learned that make you you, that helps your company succeed at a high level, and where you give direction, where you focus priority. So even in you choosing that the culture was going to be a core focal point at the beginning was a strategy for you to have a successful business and to help this team. Like, I think it's really cool that one of your first conversations was with these team players that say, hey, when we get back to number one, and man, to have that be a core vision just to start off with, and then feed into that and help everybody coordinate and build vision together around that community is really intriguing to me. I wish I had a documentary of those moments so that I could see how it all came together, but it sounds super interesting. So
I do a state of the market center address every January. And that's where I cast my vision for the year. And we spent time from October to December as a staff and as an outgoing ALC saying, what did we do well last year? Where did we go next? It's where we start thinking, what's going to be our year of 2020? What's going to be our year of 2019? Whatever that was. And I build an entire presentation. It's kind of like the national State of the Union. It's my State of the Market Center address. They know I'm going to do it.
Do you have like flags in the background and bald eagle over it?
It depends on what we're rolling out, but we try to roll out initiatives. We talk about what we're focused on. We talk about big decisions that we know are coming for the year, what we're going to be celebrating, because we've already looked at a whole calendar in advance. We've planned out our year. Coronavirus has made us make some adjustments in the 2020 year, but it really was staying, our plan for the year was to stay focused and where we were and continue to move forward. So it's working for us. It's just the strategies have had to adjust. But that strategic plan is built and laid out, again, between staff and ALC, approved by my OP. And so in January, literally this is the third Wednesday in January, that's when we do it every year. And we say, launch, this is the year. This is what you can anticipate. This is what's coming. Wow. And that idea of laying out strategically for the year just keeps us all moving in the same direction for the year. There's going to be hiccups along the way, but it allows you to have a platform.
Yeah. How often do you kind of take a pause and review that strategy versus results? And if there's any tacking required, is that weekly, monthly, quarterly? How's that work?
Every week as a staff, when we meet on our weekly staff meeting, we are saying, how are we doing month to date? How are we doing year to date? We're looking at those numbers. It's kind of like our market center 411. How are we doing? What are we doing? I mean, we're doing our daily, our stand-ups. We're doing our daily check-ins on our 4 conversations or 5 conversations now. And so we're really kind of just digging into all that. But every single week we're having strategic conversations.
Interesting. I like that. Okay. And is there any time, will you do any adjustments to strategy or like that big broad based strategy throughout the year? Is it just one big year shot of here's what we're doing?
No, we're always adjusting. We'll find out, okay, well, that's not going to work, or we didn't get that venue, or we can't do that event, or this is not going to work with the calendar because so-and-so has my MCA had to have a knee replacement surgery out of the blue. Well, okay, so that's going to change some things we were going to do then.
Yeah.
Um, my director of technology and innovation, who had started the year with us, was suddenly hired by our region to be our regional technology director. So that was a strategic change.
Yeah.
That wasn't new, right? But again, we had backup plans. I had my bench in place, and so we made some very seamless moves. But it changed strategy, and we've got a new person, new energy, new ideas. So now we're adjusting the tech strategy. So it's very fluid. It's just a playbook, and when you have the playbook, you're able to make fluid changes because you have something to guide you. And so that's why I try to lay out a strategy for the year.
I'll tell you what, man, it is an absolute honor to have the chance to chat with you about some of these things. And I can see, and as I hope others can see, as you're hearing from Mike, it's like there's a lot of people that can stand up and say, "Hey, I'm a leader and I do these wonderful things," and yet, with Mike, the proof's in the pudding, and he doesn't have to stand up on any stage and say, "Hey, look at me," because you can just hear him in his answers and the way he communicates that there's understanding, there's wisdom, there's we all have the the claw marks and the things from all the wounds in the process, but man, it's really good to hear people that are really taking all the education and getting it into use and being able to fully mature into the place where it's not a positional thing, man. You've really led a great community, a great culture, and you have buy-in, and then you're taking your message and your vision to the people, and it's working. So, man, that is super cool to have the chance to hear that come out of you that way.
No, it's my honor. Thank you for the time, Chad.
Yeah. So here's what we're going to do is this is kind of session one. For those that are interested in a little bit deeper dive, we're gonna hit pause for a second, come back, and he's going to share a little bit more information about the way his organization's set up, a little bit a detail about maybe if he does anything unique in respect to how they design certain systems behind scenes. So if you're not into the nerdy engineer stuff like me, you've had a chance just to get to know Mike, and you can follow him and pay attention. We're going to get him in some sort of cultural training program because we need to learn a lot from him on that. I do, at least. But if you're interested in some of that, check out the session 2 and the deeper dive. But thank you guys for checking in.